Hi everyone, this is a new episode type. Instead of Travels with Trish, this is Stories Behind the Needlework. And this is actually kind of a prelude to a whole bunch of Travels with Tricia episodes, but you got to find out why did I go there first. So in this episode, I'm going to be talking about some haul and you're probably wondering what kind of haul do I have since I make a lot of things, make materials and things like that. Well, often my haul is things like this, and we'll be talking about this in detail. I'm also going to be talking about some works in progress, whips, as well as a finish. So let me get to some of those first before I talk about this beautiful sampler that's in front of me. So a finish, I have Christmas baubles right here. Christmas baubles is a piece that I have done, and it's a little free project that you can do. I did it earlier this fall, and it was a project to highlight these really unusual spangles. I have been working with gold thread companies in multiple countries. There's not very many of them that exist, and in the farther east of Europe, there are folk embroideries where they use spangles that have been shaped. So they are either like in flower shapes or teardrop shapes, or they can be stamped so that they have patterns on the spangle itself, which is just so cool. And so I started bringing them into the country, having lots of them made. And I was actually there and visited the factory in May. And so I'm going to add here over underneath what I'm saying some video of the maker who is using a piece of gilded metal, gold gilded metal, and probably copper, not positive yet. And she is putting it into the machine, and she is stamping a die to cut them out. And yes, it's only 2 to 4 at a time, and she's making them clunk, 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 clunk. So it's pretty labor intensive. It takes a long time to get them. But I thought that this ornament, Christmas baubles, would be a really good way to use some of the different ones that I had recently brought to the country around the edge of the little Christmas tree made out of eyelets. And on the outside actually is a cord that I asked them to make for me. Right now, this is the gold one, but I have a gold and silver one that they made specially for me, where they have a wire which is wrapped by a bullion and a check, and it's just super, super sparkly. So very cool. Look down in the commentary and you'll see the link to the free pattern, which you can download off my site. So that's one of the things I finished this fall. Now to one of my works in progress here, and this might not look like much, but you know, I'm a teacher, but I also was a student, and I think a lot about teaching in visual form, teaching in ways where it's not necessarily words, but it's pictures or it's videos or illustrations to try to communicate something. And in this case, I have the historic sampler design class going on right now, where a whole load of people are learning how to design historic looking samplers using motif sets from past samplers. And they cut and paste them or use it in a computer program to design the sampler in lesson 1 and 2, but then in lesson 3 and 4, they start thinking about, well, how do I apply color to my sampler, and how do I apply stitches to make it more rich, right? I mean, you can do everything in cross stitch, but you want to mix it up. First of all, just to have fun to embroider with different stitches, but secondly, just to give different textures. And so this work in progress is actually an example for the students. Obviously, it's the same motif all over the entire thing. The first motif is all in cross stitch, and then the next motif, I believe, next motif is in a square stitch, and then it goes to tent stitch, then let's see, I think it's Smyrna cross, rice stitch. Oh boy, now I'm having difficulty, like examining them without my super duper my magnifying glasses on. But anyways, these are all counted thread stitches on the top with cross stitch on the bottom. And so the students will be able to see the differences if they make a different choice, what it kind of looks like, either contrasting with cross stitch, but also look at the different effects that you get one motif to another by changing the stitch. And so this is one of my works in progress. I hope it'll be done soon. I've got another 4, 5, 6 different thread stitches that counted stitches I want to do on it in order to show them some variety. And these are all stitches from The Proper Stitch by Darlene Osteen that I'm using on this little sampler. And so that's a work in progress. So now that brings me to my exciting haul, which is leading me on quite the travels of late. So the background to this haul right here, which is this beautiful sampler from 1680, is that I thought that this piece looked so fresh. I mean, it kind of looks modern in a way. Look at these, and I'll put it down, and I will use some overhead pictures here. But the flowers on the side here, they look like they could be modern. They're bright, they're very, very kind of modern figural. And I thought, hey, this is really, really great. I know it's a German sampler, but I'd like to use the motifs for my historic sampler design class. And it wasn't really great to take them off the website, so I bought the sampler to use all of the motifs in my class. And I bought it from a dealer that I really like, Martin X from X Antiquin in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam. I've been to his place a couple times, and I have quite a few pieces from his shop. His father had been the original dealer, as I understand, and he has quite a love of the material, quite a love of the history, about stories of the women behind them, and participates in a lot of the research going on in the Netherlands. So I was not surprised when in the description Martin said that there was some things known about the stitcher, because he is quite dogged at looking at that. But I was surprised at all the information that he sent me. So while I got it and I was excited because I love the sampler and the motifs were what I wanted to use for the class, but when I started reading all of the pages and pages of information that he sent me, I was like, oh my God, this is terribly exciting. I mean, this is 1680. That's a long time ago. And hopefully you notice, we'll look a little bit more careful. You have to look at it upside down, actually, to see the initials on the piece. Do you see CSK in the middle under a shield with a sword going across it? Well, there was the former owner of this had done a lot of digging. This is actually a Nuremberg sampler, so Nuremberg, Germany. It is very classic style of the period, and it is worked with a central cartouche that has a shield in it, and then it's worked all the way around the edges, like the sampler linen is being turned to work the motif. So they kind of go in from all of the sides with the alphabet on the top. It's marked 1680, and of course the CSK. And the original owner, I'm going to get some of the paperwork out here so that I don't make mistakes. The original owner had published some papers, some little articles about it, and someone wrote to her and said, well, I know from Nuremberg, I know what that shield is. That shield is the Kress family shield, as in Kress von Kressenstein family shield, and sent her this picture right here. And you can see I go the wrong way here, the sword going up and down on the shield. That's the Kress von Kressenstein family shield. So there were some individuals who started digging with the original sampler owner and into the genealogy, and they determined that there was only one girl who was in the right age in the Kress von Kressenstein family in 1680, so a girl of about 12 years old, and that was actually Clara Sabina Kressenstein. Clara Sabina Kress von Kressenstein. And we have CSK on this sampler. So we have our sampler maker. We know who did this piece. And that, I was like, whoa, that's so exciting. So they were from Nuremberg. Her mother, Clara Sabina Olhafen von Scholenbach, actually died on the day that Clara was born, which is really sad. Okay, so let me read some of this about Clara. So her father was Ferdinand Sigmund Kress von Kressenstein, Krasthoff, 1641 to 1704, and he married his first wife, Clara Sabina Olhafen von Scholenbach, born in 1650, in 1667. On April 18, 1668, a daughter was born at 10:30 in the morning. The 18-year-old mother died in childbirth, and the newborn is named Clara Sabina Kressen von Kressenstein. I mean, that's pretty cool. 1680, and we know that about her. But what gets really cool as we go along in some of this material that was dug up by the original sampler owner is that that her father took over the offices of his father in Nuremberg, that they are part of the Nuremberg Patriciate, and that she probably got an education appropriate for the time, and that her home still exists, which is like, oh my goodness. And then even better, that there is a Kress von Kressenstein dollhouse from the 17th century in a museum in Nuremberg. I mean, that is like so cool. The dollhouse that she could have been playing with exists still. I was stunned by this information. And there was quite a bit more here, particularly about who she married. She married a man named, she married at 21 in 1689, and her husband was Karl Wilhelm Welsler von Neuhoff, near Loff. Well, it didn't take long until I got a little bit farther along here to find out that that house, that castle, if you want to call it, still exists in the Nuremberg area. So now things are getting a little exciting to me. And separately, it says in these materials that in the Wessler house, which is privately owned, exists the portrait of Clara Kress von Kressenstein Wessler. And Martin sent me that as well. And like, this is like gold. Do you ever see what the woman looks like who did the sampler? That's unbelievable. Well, everything started getting even more exciting to me. So Martin pointed out that the patterns on the sampler actually come from well-known pattern books in Germany that were printed around the same time by the first family. And Johann First was a pattern book, he was a printer, he was an engraver and printer, and he had a daughter, Rosina Helena First, and she supposedly invented patterns, and he published her patterns for cross stitch, And then after she died, the family continued to publish her patterns over again. So there's actually quite a few pattern books that she designed. And the patterns are on this sampler. So let me show you one of them. Here is a page from one of her books. And you can recognize this particular motif right here happens to be, and maybe I can lift it up, happens to be the central motif there. Look at that. Let's see if we can hold it up. That's it, right there. So we know that Clara was using that particular pattern book by a girl who had published the patterns in Nuremberg as well. And if you look at, you can look at more of the patterns from Rosina's book. You can see this one right here. See these, I don't know if it's a basket or a vase or whatever with a tree coming out of it, and here too. And, well, a version of them are right there at the bottom of the sampler, or the top of the sampler upside down, however you want to look at it. And here, notice this repeating pattern. You have this carnation, you have this kind of rose, you have this daffodil, and this tulip. Well, look at the sampler in the four corners right here. There is the rose, the carnation, the daffodil, and the tulip right there around the shield. So it is the patterns from Rosina Helena first book. And then we have yet another set here of the Catholic iconography, and we have that in this particular area of the sampler. So if any of you are eagle-eyed and been staring behind me, you may see that there is a German sampler right here. This is one that I've owned for, I think, since about 2008. And then there's something right there above my head. And that is some haul that I'm going to talk about in a couple episodes, but I point it out to you because it's very relevant. When I went to Whitney's, as the last episode talks, I may have picked up a little something for myself, something I'd been watching for a long time, something related to a collection in the Boston area. It's a Nuremberg sampler. So now we've got a Nuremberg sampler right here. We have a Nuremberg sampler right here. And we have a short, strangely formatted German sampler here. And now, do you see what I've been showing already in these patterns? I'm going to get it off the wall. Ignore the little divot in the wall from the robot team. This was hanging to kind of, because I haven't painted the walls yet. But look at this sampler here. Do you recognize anything? Here are the baskets. Here we have all the Catholic iconography. This is actually a Silbermacher pattern, which the first used a bunch of the Silbermacher patterns from the turn of the 16th century. So, right, 17th century. So around 1600 was when those were published. So Rosina's patterns augment the Silbermacher patterns in the book. And then we have here, so we have these ones here and there. And then this page, look, the one below me has the roundel one. I don't have enough hands here, do I? Has the roundel here. And then this one right here has the heart. So we're obviously in a situation where this 1721 sampler was made from the same pattern books that this particular one is. And in fact, here is the little basket that you see in the middle of it on this particular pattern page. So that's pretty exciting. You have potentially, this may be a Nuremberg sampler, or at least a Southern German sampler. but definitely using the same pattern books that were being used to make this one right here. We have a Nuremberg sampler back here. We know who did this one. We know things about her, like she had a dollhouse, or her family had a dollhouse that she potentially could have played with or looked at, or however they were using the dollhouses at the time. There's more to be said about that. And so I was like, wow, I gotta look more into this because of course I'm running this historic sampler design class right now, and I was very familiar with the first family's pattern books because they have whitework patterns in them. And we did this entire big exploration of that in my whitework sampler class. So I'm getting out the pattern books again, and I'm starting to look into Rosina, and I read this, which I'm going to read to you from the Google Translate because, you know, I don't read German at the moment. So let me get that up. So if you go to Wiki and in German and you look up Rosina Helena First, it says that First grew up in Nuremberg. Her father was the art dealer and publisher Paul First. I think I said Johann. Sorry about that. It's Paul. Her mother was Susanna Helena, and Rosina Helena was the older sister of the colorist and flower painter Magdalena First. Rosina Helena also received lessons from Maria Sibylla Merian in her painting, drawing, and embroidery school. So, oh my God, we've got a potential teacher mentioned here for an embroidery school. We've got schoolgirl painting being talked about. But I had actually heard of this woman before. I had heard of Maria Sibylla Merian because I listened to a lot of historical podcasts. Anyways, and I was like, what? Maria Sibylla Merian is super famous. She is a super famous 17th century German woman. And when they said in this particular thing that she was involved in embroidery teaching, I went, what? Because I know her. I know of her. And this is where it's getting like wicked exciting. I had been given a beautiful volume of her paintings by a student after one of my tours as a gift. And Maria Sibylla Merian, I mean, there's an entire society, there are conferences that only have talks about this woman. And she's involved in embroidery. Are you kidding me? So she is famous because she is the world's first entomologist. She moved to Nuremberg to marry her dad's apprentice from Frankfurt. And she was painting these incredible lifelike flowers and bugs. I'll take that out of there. And doing these paintings. And this particular book was actually published as a set of embroidery patterns. But she was at the same time studying bugs and flowers from the gardens in Nuremberg, and she observed the first metamorphosis of silkworms. And she's credited with understanding that process. She left Nuremberg late in the 17th century and moved to a commune in Amsterdam. And at that commune, they were very involved in South America, so they were sending missionaries over there. And she goes over there to South America in order to study the bugs in South America. And she becomes world famous for this, and she supports herself on selling her absolutely gorgeous naturalistic flower paintings. But some of them are actually for embroidery. So I flipped out. I mean, I was like, are you kidding me? My sampler, the pattern maker, an embroidery teacher who's a famous scientist. I mean, I've got to know more about this. I already owned one from the same pattern makers, the use of the same patterns. And then, of course, there's the one on the wall behind me, which factors into the storyline. And I'm like, is this true? Because I mean, it's Wikipedia. Sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not true. And there's a lot going on in embroidery research. There's a lot that's been done previously, but it's not necessarily always true. That, people don't get their dates and their facts correct sometimes. They might not understand embroidery as well as those of us who actually make. So they kind of conflate facts together or make assumptions. And once it's written down, people don't necessarily always go back to wherever that fact came from and say, is that really true or could that be true? I mean, I'm sitting here going, world's one of the first female scientists in embroidery, and that would be an amazing coincidence. But we gotta really look at it carefully, and that's a detective hunt. So I really wondered whether or not Rosina Helena First had been a student of Maria Sibylla Miriam. I mean, if you take a look at this sampler right here and the flowers on it, I would not say that they are related to, I'll put this back here somewhere, to the kind of things that Miriam is supposedly painting to be, here's one, good one, to be embroidery patterns. But I'm going to do this and let you look behind me at the sampler behind me and say, that looks like a Chinese vase of flowers, doesn't it? Yeah, it could. So I've been doing this for a while. I've been detective hunting a woman from the 17th century that people thought that there wasn't much to know about, who was Martha Edlund and her embroideries. And so I kind of know how to go about doing this. And this came to light. I had this. I had just purchased that. All of this material came to light, and I went, can you believe it? I was actually leaving in 2 weeks after I read all of that for Nuremberg. And it was a total coincidence. I was going there to see the Christmas markets with my husband on a pure vacation, which then turned out to become the Grand Embroidery Tour again, for him at least. And I knew that I had to take advantage of the fact that I was there to see what I could learn about her and about her and about her. And I am going to take you with me on this grand detective hunt across Germany for several episodes. After, of course, I talk about this. I got to talk about this first so that you know a little bit more about this and why this and this is important in the Boston area, with a side trip to the MFA in Boston, which just so happens to have, surprisingly, the largest collection of Nuremberg samplers outside of Germany. So the plot thickens, and the plot gets great because, I just said that there was like this doll house and there was these houses. And what's going on in Nuremberg and embroidery at the end of the 17th century? It's a hotbed, as we will see in upcoming episodes as I travel around Nuremberg. So the sampler is quite interesting, partially because, not just because we know all of the different patterns that were used, but because also it is reversible. And I do not use that word lightly whatsoever because it's kind of bandied around quite a bit when things are done very neatly on the back. But in this particular case, Clara worked it with a particular stitch which looks very similar on the back as it does in the front. And she was very careful in the burying of her threads. And this, as I learned while being in Nuremberg, is a characteristic of the samplers worked by the girls in this particular school. Not named yet, but we'll see where we get. I'll show some close-ups of this stitch. You get this little vertical stitch in between, and that's how it passes back and forth. Also, on this sampler, we have a little hanging mechanism. can you see that there are little metal pieces here? And I'll show a close-up picture of that. These are actually from hook and eyes, and two are attached to the back and one is attached to the front, but they are brass and they've been shaped by a wire drawer around a little form in order to make these hooks and eyes. And I was quite excited to see these because we made these on the Plymouth Jacket Project according to pictures of these old ones that we found in, I think it was Janet Arnold's work, to attach the jacket in the front. And here I have a sampler that has them stitched to it in order to hang it on the wall. And I found that very exciting because it's, it's a little thing, gets me going. So I haven't gotten my arms fully around this yet, and I don't know whether or not I'll ever get my arms fully around a topic like this, like, Nuremberg samplers, let's say, or German samplers, or Martha Edlund. But you can get quite a ways down the road of putting together new information. And I know about doing this, about it's kind of from the science training. It's like, don't believe any fact until you find it yourself. And so a lot of it is going back through information and finding out where did they find that piece of information, going back and going back and going back and going back until you're sitting there with the parish record book and you're going through all of the pages and you see the handwriting changes and all of the little tidbits around on that page that tell you things, such as maybe the same individual was entering all of the babies for a particular family. Was that individual related to them? Why wasn't it the parish priest? Little tidbits like that, but going all the way back to the beginning of the information, you learn stuff because there are things that others don't feel as important, or maybe something was written down in a family letter and assumed to be true, but when you go back to the parish records, you find out the date might not be correct. Quite often when you're dealing with young women who still want to get married, they kind of unpick their dates on you all the time so that people don't know exactly how old they are. And so some information can get a little perverted along the way. One of the benefits of being, as they say, kind of like vertically integrated into embroidery, I manufacture materials, I sell them, I teach with them, I design with them, and I embroider for myself as well as for teaching, is that, I can kind of get into the head of each of the people in the chain and know what decisions that they had to deal with and what other artifacts there may be to go looking for. Makers haven't been really at the forefront of telling these stories of embroidery history, and we need to be, as we see things that other people just don't see. And so I enjoy going back and trying to understand the stories of these women. It's really, in some respects, it's like bringing us currently embroidering, back to life in a way. Someday we'll be gone. Many of us will be gone. And what have we left? For many of us, we have left a trove of handwork. But have we written down our own history? What were we thinking? What were we doing? Our loves, our tragedies, our accomplishments? Or is it just that there is a piece of embroidery which goes down the family line from hand to hand to hand? And I really feel strongly about these women of the past that we kind of lionize their embroidery, but who were they? And I know they were like us. They had children that they loved. They had maybe not a lot of time on their hands sometime to embroider as an older woman. They were young and they were learning something and they were stumbling over their stitches. But, digging into their lives really brings them back to life. And that really kind of excites me. So looking into the women of the past, it's really about a way of thinking, stepping back from what everybody else has said about embroidery and following that trail to the source, as I was just mentioning. Often I find that it's been abridged. Maybe it ended up being on a label in a museum and it used to be a whole page of information, but now they had to cross things out and it became abridged. And you can almost see it being like this qualified sentence, information about women of this class were taught to read and women of this class were taught to write and read. and then, all of a sudden they're crossing out sentences, and now it's all women can't read. Well, it's not true. So we're really reading all the time the abridged story of the women of the past versus the full, crazy, gray story of life. And I hope that you guys are going to be excited to go on the detective hunt with me all over Germany and Boston, looking at German samplers and the places that are associated with it, and we're going to see what we can find.